The artwork is called Ombre. The Ombre is a series of work we did based on the Erosion installation in Beijing for the opening of the Ars Minor show. We had special rice paper made to create a series of imprints of our ceramic pieces that then were shown exactly on the opposite side of the very large ceramic wall that was presented in the show. Rice paper is also attributed to China and Japan in the very early ages. Also, the rice paper is extremely light. It has this kind of air-like quality, and what my wish was to create a very stark contrast between the heavy erosion piece, even one cube or one tile of the 516 pieces is very heavy, and then to basically create an imprint that is almost like air as a contrast. I want the work to be pinned on a very, very long wall. So we chose acupuncture needles, very, very long one, to attach the rice papers on two sides, and lined up with the breeze in the gallery, it almost looked like flags floating in the wind. Often my work is very site-specific. When I saw the gallery space, there was this enormous wall. By presenting the works on that wall, the wall became almost invisible. The artworks basically created this very light shadows or shadowy imprints, and with the game of lighting coming from the ceiling, it created this very delicate magic relationship between the ceramic works, the pigment works, and then these ombre pieces that are really air-light, and you see even in here on the frame they act almost like flags, and they don't settle quickly. There's always this very light movement, and also here when there is a breeze, the artwork is basically moving and flowing almost like a flag. It sort of reminds me in a way of a Kurosawa movie when you have all the riders on their horses with their flags moving in the wind, and it has this incredible magic in this piece. Ceramic installation, we talked about it previously, was a tedious and complicated process. When we were laying out, setting up the show, we had this very large space, and we had very long strings that we attached on each side. They acted almost like clothing lines where you dry clothes, and we laid these rice papers over each of the cubes and sprayed them with moisture, let the moisture settle overnight, And by the time we would arrive in the morning, the molds were basically done, and when we looked at them, you could really see the very, very fine details on the imprints of every little stone or piece of rubble that was added onto the ceramic pieces. A question that also was asked me whether there is any kind of relationship of peace in this work. But it has this kind of sense of purity, and it has this serenity in this piece, which is really very, very different than the carbon dark ceramic pieces on the other side of the wall. My process is about scale and about materiality. Making imprints goes back many, many centuries. We used to embalm people. We actually still do in many cultures, and this creates prints of the body. We create molds of objects and of bodies to create artworks and for preservation. And it's a very ancient process to actually create imprints. Maybe the most famous one, or one of the famous one, which is actually not really related, it's the Shroud of Turin, which has been disputed by many scholars, but the Shroud of Turin itself is an imprint of Christ that has been talked about since it was discovered. The imprint making is something really, really fascinating. Making molds is a soft step to creating hard sculptures. I mentioned to somebody very delicate paintings of Rodin. They are watercolors, pencil colors. And when you look at these works, you don't think of the hard sculptures of Rodin. But in the middle of this process was the mold. And the mold it's really the soft stage in between the sketch, then the mold, and then the hard artwork. The more we learn about art, we are very process-driven individuals. Like they say, it's not the destination where we're going, but it's the journey that really counts. I will continue this process with other works because the result to myself was extremely surprising, how amazing this work look, and also the reaction of the people, the relationship of light and space, and actually how much emotion a piece like this, that's just a veil of paper, can evoke in somebody. It's almost like a feather of a bird that is a very complex being that is engineered highly, but then it flies. It's the unbearable lightness of being, in a way. As we know, nothing is permanent. The idea itself, the development of the idea, becomes the permanent statement of the artwork. Most artworks we need to explain, and this is something that I really had to learn from my previous work as a photographer that was instant gratification. Yes, there was a story behind the mood board, but when I finally transitioned into art, it's really the story and the process that we can explain how an artwork is made and the meaning of the artwork and its importance. And I feel each part of that journey is extremely significant. The significance then becomes the artwork, the dialogue from the public, the curator, the museum, or the art gallery is to tell the story, or when people ask, why are we doing this? What does this mean? So I think the Ombre pieces in this whole process are very high placed, and maybe from my point of view they would end up in my house, because I believe in a minimal future. I feel in an uncluttered space, and I really like the kind of feeling this artwork conveys. When we enter a space or a museum, and this is again a dialogue that I've been having more and more and more, how do we present our artwork? What is the museum of the future? How do people perceive the artwork and the relationship of the artwork? Well, this one, unlike the Mona Lisa, it's going to be very difficult to take a selfie and take a picture of the artwork with yourself, because all you're going to see is your face. Well, and this is where the importance of the story is really coming. And the space itself, and we are now working on our upcoming exhibition, actually since a very long time now, and the choice of space versus how to place the artwork in that space as a dialogue of the space or the environment is something that fascinates me more and more, and maybe we really discovered it actually discovered it very late, but we really discovered it on a 1-month trip to Japan, where we visited many site-specific artworks, where the artists, and I don't want to mention any names because each story could be a whole episode, but when you enter these artworks, I found silence. This process was unlike going to the Louvre or even into the 16th chapel where people come in and rush. No, these sites were totally silent. And they were crowded, but the moment you entered the spaces where the artworks were placed, there was total silence in each one of these locations. And I found that a very, very interesting point of view, to place artworks far apart from each other, where the journey is the essence. You need to prepare yourself to go and see an artwork. In your mind, you might read about it, you might think about it, you might be on a boat, on a train, or you might walk a very, very long time. Even if it's a shrine, that's an artwork, or a stone placed in the... It's this kind of dialogue created that as long as I can work, I really feel it's of greatest importance of my work. And when I talk to people, when people ask me questions, how important, or it is actually essential, where we show and how we show. And I feel showing art is, curating art is one of the greatest arts, and I feel of greatest importance.